Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo with co-host teacher and socialist Andy Lipson and socialist Kenny Cepeda. We are online at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my handle as at Don Eduardo Barca on Instagram. Please subscribe, rate, YouTube on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. And today we are joined with our longtime guest and always comrade in the struggle and with what always a member of our family of What's Left, John Klyczek. And John Klyczek is the author of School World Order, the Technocratic Globalization of Corporatized Education, Shrine Day books. And he has contributed to New Politics, Center for Research on Globalization, Op-Ed News, the Intrepid Report, This Dissident Voice, and Unlimited Hangouts. Welcome back.
Hey, good to be back, everybody.
Now, Andy, why don't you take over from here? See what we had for an idea for this episode.
Yeah. Well, we have not had Jake on, and excuse me, I know I'm going to use Jake, but Jake, you go by Jake or John, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
I just got to know you as Jake, and so I can't. I have a tough time. Okay. And actually, we have viewers who will contact us sometimes. I've seen where like, when is John going to be back on? When is Jake going to be back on? And most of the time, well, I'm always looking for an excuse to have you back on, Jake. And I don't really have one this time. There's nothing in particular that I can say, okay, this is going on, so you got to tell us about this. But I know we talked recently, and I can't remember why we called each other. I don't know if you called me or I called you. In fact, I think you called me when I was just about to call you, or something like that. And it was like 2 weeks ago. Do you remember what it was about?
Yeah, you called me, actually. I remember because I was standing right back there. I was looking at I was trying to rearrange my books, and I was thinking about calling you, and you called. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Well, there was something morphic resonance shit going on there. That's like some new science there going on. But what I was really, and we talked about a number of things that are happening, and I just thought it might be fun to just for you to tell us. I'm sitting here mostly paying attention to what's going on in Ukraine and a little bit what's going World War III shit, basically. And we spent a lot of episodes talking about immigration and open borders and things like that on What's Left. And each of us, Eduardo and Kenny, have our own interests. I really was hoping you just share with us, what are some of the things you've been thinking about? What do you think people should be paying attention to? Just things that are on your mind that we can just start to talk about for this episode, and just see where it takes us.
I guess I could lay out like three broad.
Oh, and one more thing, because people kind of know you. If there's maybe something if there's anything personal you want to share, like about your circumstances, I think that's good too, because people care about how you're doing and things like that.
All right. So I guess maybe four things I can lay out then. So three things that maybe we could talk about that I'm sort of are on my radar. And then I can mention briefly that I'm doing catechism for Orthodox Christianity. So I'll be done with the catechism classes. Doesn't mean I'll be all the way confirmed yet. So it may not take longer. But so that's kind of where I'm at personally. That might be different, and I guess maybe it informs. There's some of the things that we'll touch that I'm going to lay out. So the first one is.
Oh, hold on. Can you say more about what that is? What that is, and why it's meaningful to you?
Oh, you mean like just the catechism?
Yeah, I don't know too much about it. I know it's a religious thing, but
yeah. So in Protestant denominations, pretty much the process for becoming a member of one of those churches is more or less like a profession of faith. So basically, you just say something like, that you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and then usually you could be baptized right there on the spot if you wanted to, and then you would also be you'd be readily prepared take communion, so what they call the Eucharist in Catholic or Orthodox Christianity, but otherwise just communion, so the bread and the wine, or the wafer and the juice, depending on if you're, the Orthodox Catholic or Protestant. So in Catholicism, and then in the Eastern Orthodox, and I believe Oriental Orthodox as well. So I'm catechumen in Greek Orthodox Church, which is of the Eastern Orthodox, not the Oriental Orthodox Church. And those, in order to be to convert, basically to be a full member of the church, you have to go through first catechism, and it's just it's a relatively lengthy process of learning about the history of the church, early church councils that lay out exactly the theology that the Orthodox, or if you're Catholic, but Orthodox, since we're talking about me, church believes. And then once you've understood the whole thing, right? So you know what you're agreeing to, then you can be, then you would go for baptism, chrismation, and then eventually you could then participate in the full liturgy, meaning the Eucharist, meaning you could take the bread and the wine. So the catechism process is basically you're learning about the history of the church, the councils, the theology, before you make your commitment, and then from there you go through with the baptism, etc.
Well, in all the time I've known you, Jake, you've always told me you were Christian, and that was an important part of your belief in God. What do you think is different now that's making you take this step, to go even seemingly, I think, further into your faith? That's how I understand it. So what do you think? Is that what it is? And what do you think is going on that's making this kind of important for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at a certain level, writing the book and doing all the activism, for lack of a better term, is very much a spiritual mission for me. Always has been. I always try to be judicious about how much that is a part of my broader social political discourse, to the extent that, right, I mean, the book in itself as a research artifact with its own utility beyond those who may or may not come to an understanding of it from a spiritual paradigm. I try to make it accessible for people that might not be of that persuasion, but and this kind of dovetails with one of the things that we might talk about, broader things that are on my mind. We talked a little bit about some of the things that Alison McDowell was sort of analyzing about, sort of a lot of these parallel economies and parallel structures, and the way that some of them seem to play into sort of just a broader dialectic that furthers the fourth industrial revolution. And so, at the end of the day, I wonder, I don't, I like to assume that, whatever I'm doing, writing, being on the internet, speaking, traveling and speaking in person, all these things are doing something other than sort of fueling the dialectic. But it might be the case that the most important thing I can do is maybe be more overt or more explicit about sort of the spiritual dimension of this whole situation that we're in as a human species. And also along those lines, it's just that to the extent that some of that may or may not be inevitable, in terms of, right, I mean, sort of inevitably furthering the 4IR in your efforts to sort of engage with it, using a lot of these platforms. I think it can be, it doesn't have to be a nefarious or even opportunist thing. It can just be the speed and the chaos at which you're trying to keep yourself afloat can necessarily you becomes easy to possibly lose the plot. And so I don't I think it's important, and this could be personally, but it probably applies more broadly, on a more human broader level of the human condition is that I think it's important to not be vague in your spiritual foundations, and one of the ways to not be swept along the waves or the currents of this emerging great reset 4IR is to be grounded in something that is well, not just a tradition, but something that is ancient and grounded in God and the in the mystical, but something that is, for a lack of a better, as much as it is a historic reality, is basically sort of timeless and outside that as well. And so Orthodoxy has very clear uh, theological boundaries in its understanding of God and the person of Christ and the Holy Spirit, and it's a very very ancient tradition, and it's one of the oldest, certainly in the Christian paradigm, uh, basically the oldest tradition that we have, and pretty much more or less unchanged since relatively thousand-ish years, something like that. I mean, I say relatively, I mean like major councils and stuff like that. So it's both, it's a means of having a solid foundation, but also by me having a more serious understanding and commitment to the tradition, maybe I can find it'll be easier for me to make that part of my broader political social discourse without it feeling the way to integrate it all together in a way where I don't feel like I'm wearing two different hats, I guess.
I'm curious about this, spiritual journey that you're talking about. And so, from my understanding, my limited understanding, I don't hear much of the Orthodox, road in the U.S. So, how is there community like near you, or how do you access, like the community of fellow Orthodox, Christians? Like, is there how accessible is that for you physically?
They tend to be around, certainly in the Chicagoland area. There's a number of Orthodox churches, and so all your different ethnic Orthodox churches. So whether you're Greek or you're Serbian or you're Russian, uh, right? It's all under. They're all Eastern Orthodox churches, unlike the Catholics. Instead of having all the liturgy in the Latin, the See of Rome, they have them in the ethnic language of the nations in which those early churches were established. So I think there actually is an Orthodox Church of America or something like that, but most of them are going to be Greek, Russian, etc. So uh, it's funny because the one that I go to is not far. You see them. I mean, I remember seeing them like as a kid, but it's funny that usually it's one of the probably less out of the three broad groups, right? Meaning Catholic, Protestant, which right has all sorts of different groups under that you could divide it into, and the Orthodox. Orthodox is least known about, least understood. But there is a pretty large online Orthodox community. There's a few different Orthodox podcasters that actually get into some of the stuff that we talk about, so like transhumanism and the New Age and the occult and how it all intertwines with the 4IR and the Great Reset. So like Church of the Eternal Logos, David Patrick Harry, I met him at Cause Fest when I spoke in Nashville. Jay Dyer has a pretty big channel. I've been on his show a couple times. The Wilsons, Andrew Wilson and Rachel Wilson, and he has like a debate channel called The Crucible, and so so that's, I mean, there's a pretty big online Orthodox community. Oh, I just did a podcast with these guys, Synaxis guys, and I've come across quite a few people just that are Orthodox in these areas. Like so I was working on a lecture series for Richard Grove's Autonomy University. The video editor there is Orthodox as well, and he actually knows the guy that gave me this book, and he sent me the book when I was on one of those shows. So there's a pretty big. I mean, I wouldn't know how to quantify that, but it has a decent presence online. But I just walked into the Greek church, so it's a little. I mean, if you're not used to being around people that speak a different language, you might feel awkward, but it doesn't bother me. So, like when you go to one of, like, whether it's Serbian or Greek or Russian, like if you're not Serbian, Greek, or Russian, you're probably going to be the only one that's not, pretty close. But everybody's cool and everything. So I picked Greek because, that's the original the New Testament was written in Greek. So I figured if I'm going to listen to the liturgy in a different language, I'm going to pick the one where I can, understand the original Greek, the original language of the Bible. So yeah, I mean, so they're there. They're not the present like that, but yeah, there is an interesting overlap between sort of the types of research that we do and this online Orthodox community or communities, however you want to think about it. I don't want to think of it as like a monolith, but like different people from similar perspectives.
I guess my question is, what made you choose? You have, like, I've seen your bookcase back there, and then I know that you've taught courses, and I'm just trying to figure out what made you choose the Christian Judeo path, if that's the right way of asking you this question, or maybe does that make sense? Like, what from other religions or from other spiritual paths, or what is how did you come to this? What made you choose them?
So okay. So I mean, like, it's sort of like a lattice of answers to that. So
because you work as an instructor as well, like you've been in your studied person. I mean, you wrote, you've even written a book. Like I'm sure you've been exposed to many other spiritual paths.
Yeah.
Just trying to.
Okay. So look, this is Christ the Eternal Tao, and this is an Orthodox priest's analysis of how the Tao is basically the Logos, which is basically Christ. So, okay, so John 1:1, right? It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. I might have rearranged the second two clauses, right? Like I usually do. If you go to the original Greek, it's in the beginning was the Logos. It's not Rima, right? The Greek word for like a grammatical symbol, meaning a word, it would be rima. Logos was a very loaded philosophical concept that was coined by Heraclitus. He was one of the pre-Socratic philosophers. So he's this guy that says that he's sometimes known as the weeping philosopher. He's one of his better known a quote that's attributed to him that's well known is, "You never step into the same river twice." And for him, it was this idea that the world was always flux and it was always changing, right? The seasons, right? The plants died and they come back, but they die. And right, everything is always sort of, this is why he was known as the weeping philosopher, because right, everything is just always right falling out of your grasp. But right, comes back around like the seasons, right? And the river, right? You just never step in the same river twice, meaning right, because the riverbed has changed with every flowing drop of water, and it's not the same water, right? But you're in the same spot, right? So there's all this flux and change, but there's an order to it, right? There's something that keeps right the categories of nature, right, in their perspective hierarchy or ecosystem, so to speak. He called that the logos, right? Before him, you had all these people like the pre-Socratics, like Thales, thought it was everything's made out of water, right? And then you had other guy, oh no, it's fire, oh it's earth, right? Everybody, and then Heraclitus is like, no, it's logos, right? It's right from logos you get other words like obviously logic, but you do get language from it, right? You get ratio, you get order, you get grounding, and it's this idea that it's this sort of this metaphysical underpinning that uh basically keeps all the categories of the universe in their appropriate position, right? That's the logos, right? So in John 1:1, right, when he says that in the beginning was the logos, John is considered one of the unique gospels, right? The three others, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are known as the synoptic, right? Meaning they're written in a similar style. One of the distinctions in the styles between those three, the synoptic and John, has to do with how it begins. So in the others, they pretty much all begin with a lineage of the Jesus going back to David, right? It has to do with the proving that he is the Messiah that was prophesied in the Hebrew Old Testament. John, right, is sort of beginning with, this is sort of more, the audience is geared more towards the Gentiles, right, who didn't necessarily have this prophecy of a Messiah that would come. So that's not going to, you're not going to go to the Gentiles and say, right, like Jesus is the predicted Messiah. But if you talk to them about logos, right, if you talk to them about Greek philosophy, which was ubiquitous as the language, the Greek language, this is going to speak to them, right? And they're basically saying that, yes, there is an order to the universe, right? This logos thing, you're right, except that it's God and it's a person, right? And there's actually, I mean, there's a parallel to the word when you go back to Genesis, right? And it says God spoke, right? His word and his right became, you know, he spoke creation into being, right? So his word, right, orders creation, but the word logos in John 1:1 has to do with it's not Rima, it's logos. So in Taoism, right? If you've ever seen the I Ching, right? So you got the yin yang in the middle, and then you got I think I showed, we did that one episode, right? I don't know who all was here, but it's the same idea, right? It's just instead of the word Tao is the most comparable to logos, or more comparable to logos than the Chinese equivalent for right the grammatical symbol word, right? And so this whole treatise here is basically, I think it's Erma Damascene, is an Orthodox treatise on sort of the same idea. It's like, yes, this Tao thing that you talk about, right? You're onto something here, except that right, it's God. It's a personal God, and he became flesh and so forth. So for me, I mean that's a good place to start as to why, because I did have a back. I spent a lot of time studying the I Ching and Buddhism and Taoism and, you know, martial arts, and incorporates a lot of that philosophy as well. But it was actually when I stumbled onto Logos theology, which is central to Orthodoxy. It's really rooted in Orthodoxy, although I've seen other theologians, Presbyterians, etc., that will highlight, right, this interpretation. But what I appreciate about it is that orthodoxy is not like a lot of like evangelical types are like, oh, that's Eastern, it's bad, or oh, that's, you know, Tao, that's not Christian. But Orthodox would be like, we actually agree with pretty much all of this, except you're missing this part, or we agree with a lot of it, except we differ here, right? And so, which is also one of the things I like about the Orthodox church, in terms of its ethnic sort of like it will for lack of a better term, they'll say baptize or chrismate things that of a given culture, right, to be harmonized with Logos theology and the Christian faith, as opposed to like, oh, it's Eastern or it's not, right? It's not a Jesus and a cross, so, you know, it has to be sort of pushed aside. So I'm going all over the place right now, but I mean, that's sort of how I come to Orthodoxy in particular. I could talk more about why Christianity as opposed to other notions of God, but that's what I meant by that question has different layers depending on which way we want to go. And I'll just stop for now and let you guys try to make sense of some of it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I think there's more to go into that. And I do hope, I know I invited you to visit or come and join us when we go see my mom in Columbia, Missouri. I think that will be fantastic. And my brother and his wife and his kids have all just getting much deeper into faith and Christianity. So I would love having you there and just hear you all talk about that stuff. And I think they'd love to hear some of this stuff, because they're from a different, more Protestant grouping. Trying to remember what it is. I'm embarrassed that I can't remember what it is. But anyway, why don't you start with one of the? I mean, you kind of touched on some of the stuff Allison mentioned. Start anywhere with some of the things that are on your mind in relationship to the world, Fourth Industrial Revolution, whatever.
So the three things. So one has to do with, I mean, you guys are talking about this World War stuff potentially, so that's there. This whole gamified alternative economy thing, and sort of wrapped up in both of those is Trump. We can go either way with him and how that and just everything around him. And then the other one is basically just school choice, which is getting a big push right now because it's election season and Trump's probably going to win, and Republicans in general are probably going to sweep, or they're going to take back a lot of ground. So this is the time to push the school choice, the right wing stuff. It's not really right wing or left wing anyway. It's not either or. So those are the three things. We can go in either direction, talk about any one of those you want to talk about.
Why don't you pick which one to start with?
Yeah, those are three interesting ones.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's because I just got done doing this. I did a podcast with my friend Courtney Turner about school choice stuff, because they're trying to stop some of those bills, and she's in Tennessee, and so that's kind of fresh on my mind, because I went down there and we recorded, and then I scanned all the files. Well, first I dug all the files out. So, all that stuff that Charlotte gave me. Not just, this is just the books. I'm talking about the files. Like, I get these. I had to take out the 4 lobster crates, which are heavy, and separate them. I had to dig out the school choice stuff. I went through a stack of school choice, probably 2 stacks, like, as tall as me from my hips to my face. And then I whittled it down to probably something about that thick. And then I scanned all of it after I went through it and talked about it. So that's what's mostly on. I mean, I would obviously have the most to say about that, but it seems like y'all have been sort of focused more on the other 2 angles.
Well, I mean, I think Trump and school choice and economy are all kind of related if you think about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But you mentioned school choice, so why don't you it's fresh in your mind if you want to see how it ties to what you think the Conservative Party or Trump or whatever.
Yeah, well, so I did some research on it, and I just, one of the things I mean, this is kind of, I guess you could say it's research that Charlotte already did, so it's like I did it. Like I just unpacked all the stuff that she put together, basically. Had her, but this whole thing goes back to, I didn't realize the voucher program went back to the 70s. So, but there's this interesting, let me go ahead and let me share my screen while I dance around.
Hold on.
Oh, you have disabled.
Yeah, 1 second.
Disabled my ability.
Go ahead.
All right. Watch me not be articulate with this either. So here's some of the things I found. So this is one of the first voucher. Actually, the first one is going to be this, what I call this, I call it the Vichy voucher system. So this is Phi Delta Kappan. But you can see here that this is this how I make it bigger? No, that's not how I make it bigger. I messed up. How do I make it bigger? Oh, I gotta move this. How do I? Yeah, so you can see here. So this is Phi Delta Kappan. I forget, it's a publication. I think it's affiliated with the unions or something like that. I can't remember. But you can see here that this was one of the first experiments with providing public funds to private schools. And then later what would happen, it would be that, when the regimes switched around and they went, I guess, left or whatever, they were like, oh, we got to regulate this. And then so all these private schools just basically just became government schools. But then in the United States, a lot of them were these in the 70s. So we had this program here at the Alum Rock. That's a California. It's a county in California. And then also they had, where is it at? Here, it's got to be this one. Here's another one from the 70s. And Donald Rumsfeld was involved with that one. He was the director of the Office of Economic Opportunity, which was part of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. But what's interesting is this is a so-called left-wing institution, the Center for the Study of Public Policy. But they got money from the OEO when Rumsfeld was there, right? And so we all know Rank Rumsfeld wouldn't necessarily consider that guy leftist center. And one other interesting thing is, okay, so there was this Partners Advancing Values in Education. It was known as PAVE. Okay, it was an early voucher program. So if you check this guy out, so one of the executive directors was on this National School Choice Conference in 1995. And if you look at who else is on this conference, move this out of the way, you see we've got, well, some of these people aren't going to ring a bell unless you take a look at who are they affiliated with. So this person here is part of the Pennsylvania State Education Association, so Pennsylvania branch of the NEA, so union involvement. This guy here, Bob Williams, is part of the Evergreen Freedom Foundation. This thing is connected to the Heritage Foundation, and your Heritage Foundation set up by Weyrich, okay, Paul Weyrich, and Paul Weyrich, right, also set up ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, and all this school choice stuff. So you got this connected to these right-wing think tanks that have been all over this stuff. But the really interesting part is these ones here. So you got the Spadies. And so these people are, so in this file, I wish I had it in the other room, otherwise I put it on the, maybe it's in here. Well, anyway, Charlotte's got this document, and it's got somebody wrote her, and it said, "Who are the Spadies?" So I started looking up these people. So they were all connected with the World Future Society. All right. He was hanging out with Bill Gates and stuff like that. Okay. But hold on. One more in here. It has to do with the Rand Corporation, because that's the big connection. So there's this connection between the World Future Society and Rand Corporation. But that's another connection here. Okay, so look, the Discovery Institute came out of the Hudson Institute. The Hudson Institute set up by Herman Kahn. Herman Kahn, right? He should be. Hey, he should be in here. He should be right here. I didn't have this in here. He should be part of it. Okay, and Rand Corporation. He's the dude that Dr. Strangelove is based on, Herman Kahn, right? And here it is. So all this Rand Corporation stuff on charter schools. All right, but I'm just showing you some of the privately operated public schools. Bruce Bimmermore, school decentralization. Now, yeah, Rand Corporation, somebody else on here was part of, there it is, Center for Reinventing Public Education. There he is. Paul Hill. I knew there was a Rand Corporation connection to this school choice conference. All right. But if we go back here, it's this thing here, Institute for the Future. So this thing came out of the Rand Corporation, and it also helped develop this thing called the Delphi technique. Have we talked about this before? I'm pretty sure I've at least mentioned it.
Not that I know of.
Okay, so the Delphi technique is it's this strategy for artificial consensus creation. It's largely used at like board meetings and stuff like that, right? So it has to do with like group psychology dynamics. So basically, it sort of works like this: like you want your board to agree to some policy that the executives have come up with, right? So you create a scenario where you have like breakout sessions and workshops and things where you introduce the ideas that you want to be the solutions, and you put them in these groups, and you put them in these workshops where they're primed to come up with these predetermined answers, but they'll feel like they participated in it. And then you want to isolate the people that resist it. And this is how we sort of shape different companies, institutions, etc. Okay. They're taking this and they're doing it on a massive scale, like interdisciplinary, regionally, cross institutionally. So Rand Corporation comes up with this Delphi technique. They also come up with this planning, programming, and budgeting systems, PPBS. This is where this becomes the sort of the central planning mechanism for all all the different education projects that we have. So it uses terms like sometimes they call it total quality management. Basically, you take your outcomes, right, and you tie them through the economy and national security, and you funnel those into competencies through the education system. And all of that, all of this planning, programming, and budgeting, right, you're basically using that system to sort of carry out a Delphi operation to meet these futurist forecasts of something like the IFTF, okay, Institute for the Future. Now watch this. I had it up earlier, but I'm just gonna go ahead. I gotta pull it right back up. Go ahead. I've been going on and on while I pull this up. Comment or question or something.
Well,
For me,
Eduardo, you want to go or should I ask? I have a maybe.
you say it's a right-wing think tanks and conservative mostly doing this, but I'm sure it's beyond that. It's also a lot of liberals and people on the left, Democrats specifically, that I don't really think they're on the left, but they are as well a part of this school choice movement as you're laying out.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to say that it was all right wingers. I mean, the World Future Society is, it's got a milieu. You got your sort of your libertarian-ish types, and then your sort of communitarian types, but all of them more or less New Agers. But yeah, like the Center for the Study of Public Policy is like a left-wing institution. You've had people like Shanker and even Weingarten in the past that were pro school choice stuff, but right now, right, the big pump is coming from trying to use this red wave momentum to advance. I think the main thing they want to get in next time is vouchers. I mean, they kind of got a lot of foothold on the whole charter thing. The vouchers would help with sort of like impact investing directly to the student, right? Like so you could really micromanage your human resources as opposed to like having to give money to a school, right? You could give it to the student, and that student could use the voucher. The student could go to a school, or the student could, right, just enroll and get some micro credentials or badges, right? I mean, the options would be you'd have more options, like as if you thought of it as a financial instrument, right? You'd have more options with it. So I think that's the main thing they're pushing for. Man, I wish I wouldn't have lost. Go ahead. I wish I wouldn't have lost that tab, dude, because it's going to blow your mind when I find it. Go ahead.
So Lipson, sorry, you were gonna go.
Well, I guess the only thing that comes to mind is it's sort of a theme that you had mentioned, like that Allison was talking about, is that the main road that seems like it's, there's a main road of what I would say the capitalist class or our rulers are attempting to do, and then people often think that they're trying to find an alternative road that might be against that, but it turns out the alternative road goes the same way as the main road, and all of them ultimately have the same funding sources of some sort, lead to the same places. It's like all rivers lead to the same ocean. And so in the context, I mean, I'm mostly coming from a left-wing progressive background that historically has countered the idea of charter schools as as this alternative to public schools, to defend public schools. But what I was defending was essentially government schools. I was defending these essentially the state strengthening itself and telling people how to think. Now, the people who are saying, "Oh no, not the public schools, get out of that thing," well, it turns out you have the state interceding again, the Department of Defense in many ways, and all these what is the other one, the Department of Education, all coming back around and finding another way to draw people into the same web. That's what I hear in this, is that if you think there's an alternative out there that the so-called left or right, maybe some arm of, both of them are just two hands strangling you, around the same neck. That's kind of what I see in this.
And I just want to add that when I hear that, I also think of like Apple or Android, right? The choices of, supposedly you have choices, but you're still in the same ecosystem and one or the other that they're still connect back to the main road, like you said, and which means in that scenario, right? Apple, Android, you become data points in a system that is trying to make you either, many things, like a good consumer, a good, employee, a good whatever, and all these things. But at the end of the day, it's under the country. We exist in an ecosystem of supposed choice, but the choice is not made by us. It was made way before.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example because, I've been talking to a lot of people on the right that still on the Trump wagon, and they think that they're like school choice, they think that, right, you're going to have a choice, meaning you're going to be able to choose something other than the government school. But guess what? Now everything's a government school. You just have different flavors of government school. Like you said, Android or iPhone, Burger King, McDonald's, you know what I mean? Like, to use the burger analogy, it's like you're not getting a real burger, dude. You know what I mean? Like you're getting processed fast food burger. Okay, like you can. So yeah, I found this thing. So watch this thing. Okay, so this is just this is some department of the military. I pulled it out of my history, so I don't remember. It's DTIC.mil, so .military. I'm not sure what the DTIC stands for, but document here is future as an object of research. Okay, 1967. I thought maybe it would say the actual department here. So this is in connection with Rand, but they got their little disclaimer on here, like it doesn't necessarily reflect Rand's opinion, even though that we were part of it. Don't hold us to anything that we participated in. So there is the idea here of the future. It's basically there it is. So they're coming up with, this is sort of some of the early iterations of like futurist studies from a military perspective, right? From the egged along by the Rand Corporation here. So basically, they're saying like, project is undergoing serious exploration of founding in the U.S. and an institute for the future, right? So that's what we got. That's what I'm about to show you. An organizational center for future-oriented studies, somewhat along the lines of such nonprofit research institutions as the Institute for Research in the Behavioral Sciences at Stanford or the Rand Corporation. Such an organization already exists on a very modest scale in Europe, in the Institute for Zukunftsfragen in Vienna, and then another one, a World Future Society, right, was launched in DC in 1966. So basically, right, they're telling you that the IFTF, which does come out of Rand Corporation, is basically a futurist organization on par with the World Future Society here. Now, let's look at the about. Institute for maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. Institute for the Future has spent over 55 years helping people with prayer. Watch their timeline here. Okay, it says it's a spinoff from the Rand Corporation with funding from the Ford Foundation. All right. And 1968, IFTF was founded by Paul Braun, Olaf Helmer, Ted Gordon, visionaries who saw the power of computer networks to build collective intelligence. Founded Foresight on Delphi method, making sense of complex systems shaping the future, turn analyses into models and scenarios, building tools and frameworks to assess wide range of futures. Okay, so like I said, take the Delphi technique, and instead of trying to prime 10 people on a board to make a decision, think social media era, Now you can watch entire groups of people online right, sort of take the microcosm of the board meeting, make each little demographic pod on social media its own board. And now not only can we have these, we want the society to go in direction A. We've got these ideas about how to get them to arrive at that conclusion. But now we can actually gamify it with our analytics to see, right, which groups respond to which type of propaganda most, and right, how we can play them off against each other, right, in the long run. Now you keep going. This is 1970s. IFTF grew under President Roy Amaro's leadership with grants from NSFA and ARPA. Right, so which is now DARPA, right? And right, this would have been this is right around the era of right ARPANET. Okay, so now we're moving from theoretical to like we're building the actual computational infrastructure. Okay, 1980s. I don't think there's too much. Oh, so information and communication technology has changed lives. Anticipated robots, warehouse data systems, electronic shopping, and home banking launch long-running healthcare and education forecast prototype multimedia tools for modeling futures. 1990s. Here's the one that really is wild to me. This is in the 2000s. Okay, 23 years ago, between 20 and 30. 15, 20 years ago. Great Recession led to an engagement with the public in what President Bob Johansen called Foresight Insight Action. World's first massively multiplayer forecasting game, Superstruct, led players through prescient scenarios, pandemic, food crisis, outlaw economy, massive migration, energy wars. That sounds like, I don't know, like right now, like all of those things, right? You're talking about Rand Corporation, World Future Site, it's all connected to these new age occult people coming up with a computer gaming system so that they can achieve their PPPS goals, and using the computer feedback as a sort of a Delphi conditioning mechanism, and the schools being part of that, because the PPPS is the community school and public-private partnerships and the charter school public-private partnerships. And as I said with the vouchers makes it so that now, right, you can, instead of having to gamify an entire school or a school district, you can gamify each player, right, with their little token-based, stimulus response algorithms. All right, and then but that was the big one. And I just stumbled onto this just by going scanning these things and like, well, who's this? Well, who's he work for? Well, what's that? And I kept going. Rand Corporation, World Future Society, Rand Corporation, World Future, and it didn't matter which one I went through on. I'll just stop there. But then the other one was Bill Barr. Donald Barr shows up on one of these boards. All right, like Bill Barr's dad, the one that was working at Dalton when Jeffrey Epstein was hired. He pops up on one of these boards. So I'll just stop there and let y'all jump in or comment or whatever.
I'm not sure what to say about that.
Well, yeah, good.
So, I think this is like something I was talking to my partner, earlier. We were talking about like how, like this is a lot of information, right? Like in not everyone, can follow and like what is your hope, for talking about this stuff? And I guess that's a simple question I have.
Well, it might bring us back to the first topic.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, honestly. I mean, not to, not to be a downer or whatever, but I mean, it is entirely possible, or at least it would be very remiss to not consider the possibility that the best option we all have is to get our souls in repose. I mean, and I don't want to sound defeatist, I mean, even in that process, but it might. But I guess what I'm saying is, don't neglect that in the process of trying to, win. Win the gamified game of games. You know what I mean? But I honestly, like, it's hard to, like, with this, we'll just use this example, school choice. Dude, most of the people, by the time people catch up to what's the big problem, by the time people realize something's like, oh wow, like we need to do something about this. Not only is it, I don't want to say it's too late, but the alternative that you're offered at that point, the reason why you there's that much attention when it becomes like a popular kind of like, the alternative that people are ready to jump into is almost always, just the other end of the dialectic. With the school choice thing, like I remember when the last times I was at Charlotte's, and it was like right when a lot of the people started getting real vocal at the school boards. She was like, they're getting led into a trap. She was like, they think that, do they think this just started? She's like, I've been trying to, like if they're, like, what she was saying is, if you can't get all worked up about it now when it's been happening the whole time, and now all of a sudden you want to go full gusto. But dude, you not only were you not paying attention to what was happening, you can't assume that if you weren't paying attention, that now that you're just now aware of it, that you understand it. And if you don't have that understanding, then you probably shouldn't be having you should be careful about how you react, because reacting, you're like, oh, I want to get out of this. It's like jujitsu, right? One of the first transitions you probably ever learned, right? It's armbar triangle, right? You set up one. If they go out of it, you switch to the other, right? I might want you to get out of it. I might go like, oh, look, here's a way to escape, because I want, and so like I talked to a few people at a conference. It's a good conversation. It wasn't like, we're there. He was just like, I could tell he was disturbed, because I had my folder with me with all the school choice stuff. And I guess what I'm saying is, like, even with like that, like, as much as that person seemed like, didn't dismiss what I was saying, I could tell. I felt like I could he could come to my house and dig through the entire stack of school choice stuff, but is not ready for it. Like, like when you finally come out, like when you've believed in something about an institution, political, social, something historical, right? Something that you believed in that person or that institution or that movement or that thing, and you come to a point where you realize, like, it's not what you thought it was. And then you look back and you're like, people were telling me that, but I couldn't hear it, because I wasn't ready to say, well, if I can't believe in that thing, right? If I can't put any hope in that thing, I don't have a compass, so I can't do that, because then I'll be totally disoriented. So I'm not going to do it, right? And I've been there, so I get it, right? And I don't like that is a cognitive or spiritual phenomenon that it cannot be accelerated. I mean, it just requires a certain amount of time and rapport, and it's not just information presented, right? Usually it involves like a relationship with a person where, because information coming from strangers is easy to go like, oh, man, right? But like somebody that, like, you're like friends or family, and like you guys kind of have your wagons in some ways hitched, even though you might not agree on everything, right? Like, you'll be more open to it. So I worry that, or I'm concerned that well-meaning people at any step in this process might be jumping into solutions that are not solutions. I mean, and so I have no idea how to what to do about that. I mean, all I know how to do is synthesize information and try to communicate it as best as I can. But as far as the outcome, that's again, I mean, that's this me saying what I'm saying. It's very much has to do with why, I want to take my religion more seriously because it's like, it's something that I know that, that I'm getting back when you know what I mean? When it's like the outcome, it is the thing in itself. It's not for an outcome. It's not, I'm doing this to get this thing, to get success. And then it's no, right? Like it's this thing that like for its own sake, right? And has its own edification, its own value, regardless of what else happens, you know what I mean, with me or any of these other things. So I'm going on and on and on.
Well, I guess I do hear in it, like, I have been following some of Allison's videos recently, and she's talked about the ant computer and the idea that the the authoritarian push, whether it be medical or economic, that authoritarianism and the freedom movement's talk of these authoritarian institutions, World Economic Forum, WHO, these things like that, that the attempt to escape that is itself like creating a structure, and the attempt to escape it through these collectivist, more processes, and I think these are all online processes of some sort, are actually just another channel back into the same of a same trap. It looks more democratic. It looks like it involves everyone's input. I don't know enough about the ant computer itself, the way she's talking about it, to know how it plays out this way in terms of that it's a fake collective. It's faux collective almost. At least that's the way I understand it. And for me, I don't know much about that ant computer stuff, but I do know the idea that was an early part of discussions that we had with Allison and sometimes you, Jake, which was the idea that there will be no way to use this technology that we're on right now, and the digital technology that largely that we are all being pushed into or encouraged in some way, shape, or form to use and utilize. There will be no way of stopping the world that's coming, that is going to be more restrictive, and more polarized between, I do believe, between the very wealthiest or very most powerful and the rest of us, who will find ourselves more disenfranchised as a result of this kind of world. There won't be a way of changing that through this medium. Now, that's as much as I make of something like this, and I don't know if there's something deeper there, because it does tell me that the traditions for finding freedom are not to be found here, are not to be found online, are not to be found in anything digital, and that by and large we're going to have to get to physical associations and old historic, like indigenous traditions, if we're going to find a way out, from what is a trap, no matter which way you slice it, kind of thing. That's how I understand that, and I so part of that I think I already believed, but I don't know if there's something deeper being said, because my concern is that if every door leads to nothing other than the same place, if we say that, then really there's no point in opening any door. There's no point in changing any course for yourself or for any part of your community. And that part I would say I'm not ready to accept, because then it really is just me and Brandy do our own thing, and invite Jake to join us in Colombia, and maybe later on when things get worse, we try to connect in other ways. And my brother's trying to find property in Arkansas that is like off the grid, that kind of thing. So, but that would say that it's just save your own skin, there's nothing we can do. You can just kind of find your own way among a coterie of people who you're close to and you trust. And when finding your own way just means find your own foxhole. And that may be true, because there may be no way of avoiding what is coming in the future, but I'm not prepared. That to me has a hopelessness, which would basically say, there's no point in even trying. That's the part I struggle with.
Amen.
I guess I'm trying to, like, what I hear from Jake, and I think this brings me back a little bit to some conversations that we had with Allison about that inner life. That's what I hear from Jake, that becomes very important. Like that's the start. Like that's because like resisting leads us to traps, right? Like in ways that we think we are resisting, and so at least what I hear is that's why the spiritual part, the inner part, right, the part that is more mystical and unknown, really. And we had this conversation, right, Libson, about faith and why we do something. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that getting lost in the sauce of fighting back, you lost the battle already. If you're not focusing on that grounding part inside of in that affects how you in turn interact with the world, right? And what I mean by that too is that, because I just think of my own, we call it mental health, but I think it should also be called a spiritual crisis. When you're not right inside of yourself, and something is wrong, and you're trying to change the world, and you think some things, right? But in that resistance, you're actually, because you're not right with yourself, because this happens to me, and and it goes in cycles. Like, I try to find my grounding every now and then, but again, in trying to fight back, you push potentially the people that will be on your side to create that space, right? Like that could potentially create a bubble that may grow or may not grow. We don't know. And that's an act of faith in itself to me. But it starts with yourself, and and I guess like maybe we've been programmed to think that that's a bad thing, that's selfish and in some ways. But I mean, it's really the only thing you have real access to, right? And I don't know. And so that to me is what I'm hearing from Jake, and that in his journey, because it resonates with me, that that's the journey I'm on, because I'm still learning about this stuff, but I'm no longer preoccupied with like telling people necessarily, like this is how it is and this is what's happening. You should be scared, and it brings me back to that conversation, Eduardo. And I don't know if you want to keep it, but we talked about the future. Let's put it that way, right? And Lipson asked me about my kid, right? What do I feel about raising a kid, in the context right now, and like I know that, or at least I think I know that there is a potential for war to break out, out of our control. But I can't control that. Horrible things can happen, random things can happen every moment, every day. But if I live with the fear of that, then I'm not living. I'm not here and now. I'm not present for myself. I'm not present for my child, for my partner. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but that's a struggle, right? Like to kind of succumb to like acceptance, and and struggle with the inner life, whatever that means, to gain some sort of peace and balance, and or whatever, that's contrary to this psychotic stuff that we're being bombarded with. And that's just what's in my mind about this stuff.
Eduardo, do you want to say something?
Yeah.
I mean, I Well, I guess the only thing I have to say is that these things can get very overwhelming, and I could fall into that trap where people might think that the only way to do it is inevitable, and that we might just have to take care of ourselves. I mean, it's an onslaught of attacks from very powerful forces and people who have money, and people in power, whether it's in public education or our system of our economy. But I stand by what you said, Andy. I think we could all just live our own lives, and you know, I just choose not to just live our own lives. Whether I'm here in Bogota, Colombia, or in San Francisco, California, or in Mexico City, or in Paris, France, I try to find my place to be a part of something, to collectively do some action. You know.
I, and like for me, living your life is everything. It's part of it. Like you don't. It's you have to be in harmony too with that part. And I guess my point is that if I'm living a good life, if I'm pursuing a good life, then that is infectious. My hope. That's what I hope. But I don't do it for that. I do it because I have to live a good life. My life cannot wait for tomorrow. My life is today.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kenny, because I think I want to say something contrary to that, and I want to see what you say. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, see if this is what you're saying, and if I'm misunderstanding it, because about 14, maybe 15 years ago, when I was single, I think, I don't know how many years it was, but when I had my last breakup with a partner where I thought, oh, I'd figured things out about relationships and I wanted to be with someone, and I had my own issue with my families, and I didn't feel so connected with my family, and the world was rotten, okay, but there was no movement to make the world unrotten. I started counseling, and I do believe, as a result of starting that counseling, and of course the people, the people you meet along the way, the Hemmas, the Jennifers, the Eduardos, the Kennys, the Bryans, the Brandys, and they all make an impact on improving who I am as a person. But I've become a better person in these last 14 years. But 2 years ago, I was stuck looking at computer screens with my students, regardless of whether I became a better person or not. That me becoming a better person did not change the fact that I was looking at screens and being forced by somebody's hand to look at the future that was being made manifest for us. This is our future. Here it comes. Everyone's going to be on screens. This is how you're going to be running the world will be run. And ultimately, you're going to be replaced. We're collecting your data, and fuck you, we're replacing you with computers. That all happened. Even I got married. Like, I have become a better, more centered, less angry person in that time. And the world has become a deeper shithole at the very same time. And the thing that I still, well, I don't believe there's an individual. First of all, I believe there's a solution to this. I believe that humanity is not doomed, because I think if the forces that are in play are left unchecked, we are doomed. I personally think it leads to World War III, but if I'm wrong, other people will think it leads to the singularity and the transhumanist stuff and AI nightmare, but some kind of panopticon prison that we're trapped in. My hypothesis, my faith statement, is that there's a way out of that, and there's a way to stop that preserves humanity and allows humans to live lives on the earth as biological creatures, like ducks and yeast and fleas, like that. We're just part of that, instead of being separate from each other and from just the organic living self. And self, I just mean the whole organism of earth and universe and blah, blah, blah. But I believe the possibility of that is not found individually. I do believe the possibility of it is found collectively. And so I struggle with something which says, if you try to find your own way, you're fucked. If you try to find a collective way, you're fucked. But so I read it as saying, well, that's in that particular region. It's in the digital realm that you're fucked. It's not so much in the physical world. Maybe that's not what, but I don't hear that distinction per se. And I'd have to hear that from Jake, or maybe Alice is not here to speak on it. I hear in it a kind of like, it's hell. Abandon all hope, he who enter. Right. That's what Dante says on the gates of hell. And I'm reluctant to abandon that hope that we could do something. And that's what I worry that that's where this leads to, unless you are really clear about what you're saying. And maybe that's for Jake to speak to, or you, Kenny, to speak to, I guess.
Well, I still, I still call myself a socialist, or like, if we have to identify, something, but there is no we if my inner me is not right, because you repel people, you repel community. That's what I'm trying to say. That in because community is better when individuals are right too. You know what I mean? And so it's also like a dialectic too, I guess, that the community has to be right and individuals have to be right. And so, but you have to take, like, attempt or try, first, like, I realized, like, there's a bunch of things that we're being bombarded with. And trust me, I'm not even close to getting this shit right. I struggle, struggle. Even though I understand somewhat of like what's happening, right? Like in some of the connections that, Jake is talking about, I still struggle. And it's not just technology, even before this push to, like, for technology to be more in our face and our, and we're stuck and plugged to this matrix. Like, we've, like, at least like what I call the capitalist system, the way we relate to each other has isolated us already. In that, in that creates problems in that create an imbalance, an inner imbalance on people. In the people who tend to resist or think they're fighting the good fight are actually not, I think, in my process, because I've been that person who repels people because I'm not right inside. And I think I'm fighting the game, but the game is eating me alive inside.
Jake, I'd like to hear what Jake has to think about what we're saying.
Eduardo went like this. You want to talk real quick? You sure?
No, I was pointing towards you.
Oh, you're pointing at me. Well, I don't know that they're mutually exclusive. Like, do yourself or do your community, like group salvation or individual salvation. And I guess I mean, I'll just speak anecdotally. I don't, when I say, best I can come up with for me is get my soul in repose, take my, faith seriously, like get grounded there. It might sound like sort of relinquishing, my fate to, darker days, and that, it's this private self-centered thing, where I'm gonna just take care of my soul or whatever. But it's not a retreat in any way. I mean, it's, if anything, it's a recharging, or, like, look, I could and I've I've done more than I thought I could or would ever do with this book. I mean, getting it done, and then, meet Charlotte and all that, been would be all over literally in several other countries at this point. Like, I could sit here and be strategic about political this, social that, economic this, education that, technology this, and and go down with the ship or whatever. and neglect to ever do anything as far as getting my soul in repose. And uh, let's not even speculate on what the outcome would be, positive or negative, in terms of like what fruits be uh, would grow from the seed sown from that strategy. Would that nonetheless be is I mean, you could consider that the group collective social, right, uh strategy. Would that not be equally self-centered if I didn't ever take the time to make sure that what I was doing was grounded in the truth of the fact of God's creation and his design for his creatures, his universe, and uh if I neglected to make sure that, right, uh that I was right with God, that you know, how could I, what would be my metric for knowing whether or not I'm not just trying to, you know, sell books and be of some kind of political report or import, like and not that that's the case, but I mean, like, uh we talked about like audience capture stuff on the phone, remember?
Yeah.
Like, I could see how it could easily, and by the way, I have an audience to be captured by, but I think we talked like in my own, I got to the point where, okay, I work a lot of jobs to pay bills. I don't have a lot of time afterwards to do this type of stuff. Like, dude, I never even made any traction, and it was already a thing where it was like just always there. No matter time I was writing or doing an interview, it's always like, oh, did I get? Am I gaining enough momentum economically or in terms of visibility to fuel the engine I need to get done the mission that I think I need to get done. Like, right at that point, I think it's still pretty much unadulterated. Like, it's like I'm just trying to get enough money to where I have more time to do this thing that I entirely genuinely believe is like important for the, morally, ethically, for the fate of the human species. Like, uh I'm pretty sure it doesn't take too much longer, just knowing the amount of having that other thing there, that doesn't, probably not that hard to be audience captured or lose the plot. Like, and guess what? You might still be doing great research, and you might still be, getting good information out, and it might, it help people navigate the world we're moving into. But could you say, is it, once you're at that point where it's like, where some of your decisions start to be determined by clicks or money, or, well, I got to do this to keep the boat afloat, right? I'm not in the fight if I don't keep the boat afloat, type thing. Uh, right at that point, is it any different than taking your ball and going home? I mean, in terms of the level of selfishness, right? So, I mean, like, for me, I guess, like, I want to be solid enough in my faith where I say what needs to be said, and I do what need to be done, and I'm not worried about whether or not the message is getting far enough to the right people, or do I have enough money or time to do more or less, and whether or not the outcomes are going to be Mad Max, or we all get to ride off in the sunset. Like, I don't want, if I feel like if I'm doing things for any of those other things, to me, that ultimate, in many ways, it's ultimate. That's more self-centered than me. Like, just like, okay, let me just step back for a minute, right? Especially on my Sundays. It's first week of Lent, and I didn't go to any of the evening services. I should try to make one tomorrow, but right, like, as like part of liturgy, we leave the cares of the world behind for a moment. Get cleansed, get washed, right, and and come back with a clear perspective, right? Like, because I'll tell you, I mean, I think I've told you too, like, dude, that's an exhausting, this is a marathon that we're in here, and you got to be like David Goggins level where it's like you just, you know what I mean? Like you're going to get to the point of exhaustion, and guess what? We're just getting started, right? So like I need to for me, yeah, it's sort of the solitude or the private nature of my spiritual walk is not divorced from that. If anything, it's hopefully gives me more endurance and makes me clearer about what I'm actually doing, right? Like the compass, I have a compass that's not where I'm trying to wear too many hats, I guess. Because at the end of the day, I mean, let's just face it. None of us can control any of the outcomes. You know what I mean? So that doesn't mean that I don't feel like it's a waste of energy or time to, like, let's say we could peek and see the end of the movie, and we knew, that we lose or whatever. I still wouldn't stop. I'd still be doing what I'm doing now in terms of, but you still got to find a way to have the enough to finish the race.
I have appreciated this. It's not where I expected this conversation to go, but with you, Jake, I'm not surprised we got to this stuff. And I'll say I kind of would like to do round 2 next week if we could, to be honest. I think what has been tapped into here has been is really the ongoing battle that I've had for much of my organizing life, but is more I'm more aware of it now because I'm a little personally clear as a result of being personally less distracted by all the really issues of my past and childhood that kind of can clutter things. I'll just say that I think this question of like, is what I'm doing, does it matter? And can we make a difference? I think those questions, can I make a difference? Can we make a difference? I think those questions are always there. I will say we are asking this question in my opinion, in the complete absence of a movement. I mean, we talk about the freedom movement, but it exists really more online, and I think it doesn't really exist until it has a real physical manifestation that lives in your everyday world. My feeling.
Question mark?
Yes. That'll be the title of this episode. Question mark. But Jake, it's good to see you. Definitely.
It's good to see you guys as always. I hope I wasn't too much of a downer, but
honestly, you reminded me that I need to organize some stuff.
Okay, well, somebody got something out of it. Good. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jake. And let's find a way for us to conclude. But that does it for this week's episode. John Klyczek is the author of School World Order, Technocratic Globalization and Corporatized Education, Shrine Day Books, and he is a contributor to, as I said before, New Politics, Center for Research on Globalization, Op-Ed News, The Interpret, Report, The Dissonant Voice, and Unlimited Hangout. Thank you. Let's see. What's Left is a weekly political podcast on this channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests. Episode notes for this episode or on our blog and what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes, including other ones that we've done with Jake, to this podcast on channel there and connect with us. So I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications. to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes, Podcast, Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, or Rumble or Telegram, and you can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes of where it is in this episode. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. We did an episode where someone did just do that, and we covered it. So, for folks, I'm not just saying that for reading's sake for our outro. All right. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-hosts Kenny Cepeda and Andy Lipson. Thank you very much, Jake Klyczek, for joining us again. It was always fun. We'll have part 2. I think that's what we're doing. And we'll check you out as well with the links to you and anything that's related to the episode that we've done with you before. Thank you all for listening and for watching. Ciao.